Okay, hey everybody, I'm back, and here we are with Regents Review number 10. Okay, the first question has to do with recursion. Okay, find the first term in the recursive sequence. So we know that when we are working with recursive sequences, every term is based on the last term. So we always need to know what the first term is. So it's given to us that a sub 1 is equal to 4. And we need to get to the fourth term. So a sub 2 is equal to 3 over 2 times a sub 1, which is 4, plus 10. Okay, and 3 halves of 4 is 6, and then 6 plus 10 is 16. Okay, so remember the previous term is used to get the next term. So now when I try and find a sub 3, what number am I going to put in here? That's right, I'm going to put in a sub 2, which is 16. So now I'm going to find 3 halves of 16, so that would be 24, and 24 plus 10 would be 34. So now I just have to get to the fourth term. Again, the fourth term has to use the third term. So I'm going to take that 34 and put it in my equation, and I get 3 halves of 34 is going to be 61. And that is the fourth term. So that is my answer. Okay, on to the next one. This one is write the following in vertex form and state the vertex and whether it's a maximum or a minimum. Okay, so now let's look over here. Y equals A times X minus H quantity squared plus K. That is vertex form of a quadratic equation. All right, the H and the K is the vertex, and that's why it's called vertex form, because you can easily see what the vertex is when you look at it. The A value, if it's positive, it's facing up, and if it's negative, it's facing down. Now, if it's facing up, then the vertex is going to be a minimum. It'll be the lowest point, but if it's facing down, it'll be a maximum. All right, so just if you look at that negative, I already know that since my leading term is negative, it's going to be facing down. So my quadratic is going to be like that, which means this point here, the turning point or the vertex, is going to be a maximum. All right, so even without doing any work, I can tell that. All right, and now in order to find the vertex, I need to put this in vertex form. So I have f of x is equal to, now remember, we need to complete the square. And in order to complete the square, we can't have anything in front of our x squared. There's no coefficient at all. So I need to take out that negative, or negative 1. So when I take that out, I have x squared, and then I have a negative 6x. Now this plus 5 just kind of gets carried on later. It really isn't involved in the completing of the square. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a perfect square trinomial. So remember how you do that. You have to take that b term, cut it in half, and then square it. Okay, so that would be plus 9. Okay, but I didn't really add 9 to the equation. I really subtracted 9, or added a negative 9. So I'm going to have to add 9 and then bring down that negative 5. Okay, so if you went back to try and make sure you didn't make any mistakes, you would see that negative times x squared is negative x squared. Negative times a negative 6x is a positive 6x. Negative 1 times the 9 is negative 9, but then we're adding the 9 at the end, which eliminates that, and then we have negative 5. So we're all good. We didn't do anything but just change the look of the equation. And if you have me as a teacher, you know that I usually say that 2 tens equals a 20. All right, so it's still the same thing. It's still a $20 bill. It's just change. It's just 2 tens instead. Okay, so now we want to make this perfect square trinomial into a binomial squared. So I know that that would be x minus 3 quantity squared. And then 9 minus 5 is 4. So this is vertex form. All right. So now all I need to do is I need to state the vertex. I already stated that it was a maximum, but the vertex, remember, is the opposite of what's inside the parentheses. So my vertex is going to be a positive 3 and a positive 4. Okay, and that is my vertex. All right, on to number 3. All right, number 3, Alexa earns $33,000 in her first year of teaching and earns a 4% increase in each successive year. Write a geometric series formula, S of n, for Alexa's total earnings over n years. Use this formula to find Alexa's total earnings for the first 15 years of teaching to the nearest cent. Now, what's really important here, and they give you a lot of hints on how to do this question because they specifically say to write a geometric series formula. And remember, a geometric series formula is right on your reference sheet. But another hint, if they hadn't said that, if they had just asked the question, it says use the formula to find Alexa's total. Now, if I just wanted to find what she made in the 15th year, I would just use the geometric sequence formula. But since I want the total, how much she's made along all those 15 years altogether, I have to use the summation formula. Okay, so I have S of 15, because it's 15 years, A sub 1, she starts out with the $33,000, all right, minus A sub 1 again, which is 33,000, times my R value. Now remember, the R value is the rate. The rate is 4%, but it's an increase. Okay, so since it's an increase, we have to add it to 1. So it's 1.04 is our rate of change. And then raised to the 15th power, that's at my n, over 1 minus 1.04. And then it's just a matter of putting this into your calculator. Okay, when you put it in your calculator, you end up getting $660,000, 778, and then 39 cents. And that is the amount, the total amount that she's made throughout those 15 years. Okay, change to center radius form and state the center and the radius in simplest radical form. So you can see over here on the right that the center radius form is x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared, where r is the radius and hk is the center. So we need to convert this to that form. So we're going to be completing the square again. But we're going to need to do it twice this time because there's x's and y's. All right, so we're going to group the x's together. So I have x squared plus 16x. And we're going to complete the square there. So remember, I'm going to take that 16, cut it in half, and square it. So that would be 64. But I can't just add 64. I would have to subtract 64 as well. Then I have my y's. So I have y squared minus 10y. And I'm going to have to do the same thing again. I need to complete the square. So I have to divide by 2 and square it. And I get 25. So I'm going to add 25, but then I also have to subtract 25, and then bring it down that plus 17. All right, and then as we did in the last problem, or the problem before that, I guess it was, I'm going to change my perfect square trinomials to binomials squared. So that's just taking half of that b value, half of 16 is 8, okay, or the number that we had to square. And then do it again. I have y minus 5 quantities squared. And now if I go ahead and add all my constants, I have the negative 64, a negative 25, and a positive 17. I have negative 72 equals 0, which of course I'm going to go ahead and add that to both sides so it's in center radius form. Now remember, when you're trying to find the center, right, these are both inside parentheses, so it's the opposite. So the center is going to be negative 8 and a positive 5, and the radius is the square root of 72, which I can simplify to 6 radical 2. Okay? If you're doing this manually, you know that 72 can be broken up into the square root of 36 times 2, and that's where we get the 6 radical 2 from. But remember, you also can put that into y equals 72 divided by x squared, and if you look at your xy table, then your lowest or smallest y is 6, and your x is 2, and that's how we get the 6 radical 2. All right, one more question. State the equation of the parabola in standard form given the focus of 6, 3 and the directrix of y equals 1. So there's a few things we have to remember here, and we haven't done a problem like this in a while. Okay, so first of all, let's try, I'm going to try my best to graph this. Okay, if I have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, that point is going to be about there, and that is my focus. Then I have the directrix, which is a line of y equals 1. Okay, so if you remember, the definition of a parabola, the locus definition of a parabola, states that every point on the parabola is going to be equidistant from the focus and the directrix, which means that the turning point, as you can see in the diagrams on the left here, the turning point has to be midway between the focus and the directrix. So I'm going to go ahead and put that point on my graph. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and sketch my parabola. So that point here, the vertex, that's midway between the two, is going to be equal to 6, 2, right? 6, 2 is between 1 and 3. That's where I'm getting the 2 from. So the formula for this is x minus, and then my h, which would be my x value of my vertex is 6, squared, equals 4 times p, which I'll get to in a minute, y minus 2. Okay, so the focus does not go in the formula. It's the vertex that goes in the formula. Okay, now the p-value is the distance between the focus and the vertex, or between the vertex and the directrix. Whichever you choose, it's going to be the same thing. You just have to keep in mind, however, that if the parabola is facing up, p is positive. If it's facing down, it's going to be negative. Now in this case, there's only one unit between the focus and the turning point. And it's facing up, so my p-value is 1. But keep in mind that on the quiz that you're going to have, p may not necessarily be a positive number. If it's facing down, if the parabola is facing down, you have to remember to make it a negative number. Okay, now this particular question is asking for it in standard form. So I'm going to have to multiply all this out. So when I multiply this, I get x squared minus 12x plus 36. Remember our identity, square the first, double the product, square the second. And that's going to be equal to 4 times y minus 2. Now I'm not going to multiply that out. I'm going to divide by 4. And remember, I have to divide everything by 4. So now I have y minus 2 is equal to 1/4 x squared minus 3x plus 9. So now when I add 2 to both sides, I have my final equation, y equals 1/4 x squared minus 3x plus 11. Now, if it hadn't asked for this equation in standard form, okay, then I would have instead been able to leave it as, I'm going to go back a little bit. I am at the point where I have x minus 6 squared equals 4 times, times y minus 2. Okay, now at this point, if I divide by 4, I would get y minus 2 is equal to 1/4 x minus 6 squared. And then once I add 2 to both sides, I end up having this in vertex form. So if it asks in vertex form, you don't have to multiply your binomial. Okay, but this is the answer for this question because it does say standard form. Okay, we're all done for today. Make sure you study and make sure you try these questions on your own. All right, don't just watch the video and think you've got it. All right, have a good rest of your weekend or rest of your day, whatever day this is. And for you, it's Saturday afternoon for me. All right, and I will see you in the hallways or in class.